Hello, and welcome to Build Back Liberal. This time I'm doing something slightly different. This episode will be slightly less policy focused, and I'm joined instead by my friend Jessie Venegas. Hello, Jessie.
Hi.
So, this time we thought we'd talk more about Jessie's personal story and experience and what we can learn from that when we think about where the Lib Dems need to go in future and what lessons there are there. Jessie, ultimately we'll get on to the fact that you were a parliamentary candidate in 2019. But if we wind back, what is sort of your story coming up to the point where before you came to the UK? Like, who are you essentially?
Okay, who am I? So I was born in Mexico, but I actually never lived in Mexico. I moved to Colombia when I was about 3 years old, and then I lived in Colombia for a number of years. And there was a time where Colombia was not the safest place in the world, and so it wasn't that my area where I lived was an immediate danger. In fact, as a teenager, I didn't even realize that I lived in a dangerous country. But came a moment where my family realized that it wasn't a good place for us to stay or for a place for us to grow up. And so I went to live with my aunt in Canada. And I think the move to Canada was an interesting experience because I suddenly saw Colombia in the way that the rest of the world saw it. And I would say things like, well, Colombia is not that dangerous. And they're like, oh, yeah, but didn't that happen? Didn't you say a friend of, your father's got shot? I'm like, yeah, but that happens in every country. Like, I was so used to the level of violence and, the fact that there were bombs on the news all the time, the fact that people got kidnapped. It was sort of part of my normal growing up experience. I didn't realize that the rest of the world wasn't that dangerous. And then I started learning about Colombia, learning about our history, and realizing actually that I was living in a very, very dangerous environment. It was particularly dangerous for me as a young person growing up, with young people being recruited for all the different parts of the conflict. And I saw that with my friends. But it was interesting that it took me moving out, being in a different environment, surrounded in a different culture, to understand just how dangerous and toxic that place was.
So, after you lived in Canada for a few years, how did you come to live in the UK?
So I lived in Canada and I did my undergraduate degree there, and my family had studied, also my uncle had studied in the UK. And so I always had this dream of studying at a UK university, and I really thought that one day I could study at Oxford. But when I was 15 and I didn't speak English, and my education had been so limited, that seemed like a pipe dream, like something quite silly for me to aspire to at that age, given my current place. But I just thought, okay, well, I'll give it a go. Came to the UK, studied at a university in the UK, and then was offered a job at a school. Then saw the opportunity to study at Oxford, and I thought, okay, dream come true. I think this is something I really wish to pursue it. And it was a very it's a story that if somebody told me at 15 that was going to happen, that I was going to be able to do that, I don't know if I would have believed them, because at that point I was struggling just to order food at a restaurant because my English was non-existent. I was struggling just to make sure that I could get through customs without being hassled. And so the thought that I would go and do all these things was completely unthinkable at that time.
So, what was your sort of initial experience with the UK like in terms of us coming here as an immigrant? Obviously, you lived in Canada, which is not an entirely different country in a lot of ways, but what was your initial experience like?
I think actually the UK was very different from Canada, because Canada is very, very proud of its multiculturalism, and I went to a school where multiculturalism was the thing that Canadians were most proud of, and people were very quick in accepting me as a Canadian. So they say, oh yeah, but you're going to be a Canadian soon. Of course, there was a couple of moments in Canada where I thought, what I realized, there was certain barriers. I very distinctly remember the day I found out I wasn't white. I mean, I remember talking to a girl, and she said, "Oh, but you're not white." And I was like, "What do you mean I'm not white?" She's like, "You're Latina." And I was like, okay, I knew I was Latina, but I didn't understand that being Latina was an alternative to being white. And I didn't understand the context that she mentioned about being Latina. So I went home that night and I Googled Latina, and I was greeted with a lot of, pictures from porn sites and, women dressed in fetish made outfits. And I was actually quite shocked that this term was applied to me, and that there was this distinction. So that was like my first introduction to the West, the Western perception of Latinas. But then I came to the UK, and being Latina was not a thing here either. But actually, very quickly I realized that people weren't necessarily proud of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism was a contentious topic. It wasn't something that Britain necessarily wanted to promote. Yes, Britain wanted to promote it on the surface, but not really. And I didn't experience it going into different areas. And I can't say that I was ever discriminated against us being an immigrant in the UK. Like, I've never had a real, an experience where I could think, okay, this is discrimination. But I do feel that there was more than one occasion where I felt very unwanted being an immigrant, yeah? Because there's that perception that you come here to take jobs, you come here to take welfare. I don't know how we manage both at the same time, that's beyond me. But there is this notion of you are not welcome. And now I am a British citizen now, but if I ever said, okay, yes, I'm British, I think there will be lots of questions. It's not like if I were ever say to a Canadian, I'm Canadian, I think there will be, oh, they will accept it. They'll be like, oh yeah, you're Canadian. Everybody in Canada is from somewhere else. But in Britain, I don't think that works the same way. And so even though I'm British, I would hesitate to tell someone, oh yes, I'm British, because they will say, oh yeah, no, but where are you really from? That's not the answer I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to explain your accent or explain your look and explain your background somehow, because you are not what we would consider to be British, which tends to mean white Anglo-Saxon, with a long history of having family in Britain. So I don't know, does that answer your question?
I think that's really interesting how the sense of being British is actually more tied to ethnicity and sort of your family and where your origins than is the case in, say, Canada or perhaps in the United States as well. That there's a very close link between being British and being white British in that way.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And it was really interesting because I remember having a conversation when I was studying at university with somebody who was, so traditional British. And I mentioned somebody else and I said, oh no, but she's British. And he goes, really? I don't think she's British. I was like, what do you mean she's not British? She's British. And he goes, no, but she's like, she has Indian or Pakistani background. I was like, what? Like, I couldn't understand how, in his mind, that meant that this person we were speaking about wasn't British. And that was my introduction, because in Canada, that it was never like that. In Canada, there were people of different colors, different, people who were one generation British, or my family even, one generation Canadian. My family became Canadian, and they were Canadian. Nobody ever questioned, oh yeah, you're Canadian, but you're actually really from Colombia. That didn't happen there, or at least not in my experience. But in the UK, I did find that happening very frequently, and it always had some link to skin color or ethnicity, which I thought quite bizarre.
You came to the UK, you lived here a few years working principally as a teacher. What prompted you to then get involved in politics in the UK?
I have to say that Brexit. I mean, when I was at university and I was doing my law degree, we did study the European Union, and I could understand the sort of more factual arguments as why people could want to leave or remain and all that kind of stuff. But for me, the thing that was the most important or the most inspiring was the rhetoric around immigration and how toxic that rhetoric was. And the fact that the debate didn't seem to be about the facts or about the proper advantages and disadvantages of membership, which I could see, merits in both, but this use of ethnicity and immigration to stir up emotions and to get people fired up, I found that to be quite concerning and quite dangerous. And I remember picking up the metro on my way to work one day and reading a letter to the editor somebody had written where they were describing immigrants as cockroaches. And I just remember how that made me feel, because, I've studied history and I know that where rhetoric like that has been used and the things that have been done in the name of dehumanizing fellow people, just through arbitrary distinctions, just because people have a different color passport. And I just thought, at the time I couldn't vote because I wasn't a British citizen at the moment. And I felt rather powerless, and I felt quite angry that, that these things were happening. I thought I need to do something. And so I thought, okay, I'll volunteer with the Lib Dems because they seem to be the only voice of reason at the time, the only temperate party with sensible arguments, where I felt very welcome. So I don't know exactly how it happened, but before I knew it, I was in Lib Dem headquarters on the phones, learning how to talk to people and try to convince them to vote against Brexit. But we all know how that went.
So you went on then to become a parliamentary candidate. How did you feel? What made you want to become a parliamentary candidate specifically, and how did that sort of play out?
How did I want to become a parliamentary candidate? Well, I think the first thing was that I was a local council candidate. And that came about because somebody in my local party asked. They said, oh, we need candidates. I was like, I don't know the first thing about how anything works. They're like, don't worry, we just need people to stand. It's a Lib Dem ward that we don't, there's very little chance of you winning, but when you need to put your name forward. And I thought this was terribly exciting. So I remember I got all dressed up on the day of the count because we didn't really do any campaigning. And it was a really interesting prospect. And I thought, okay, well, this was interesting, but actually I don't just want to be a name on a ballot paper. I don't think that is what's supposed to be like. I realized that there are, in some cases, very little chance of me winning, but there is no chance if I don't try. So I've always been of the thought that even if there is no chance, you do your best. You put your best foot forward, you push to the boundary, and let the public decide. I mean, it's not up for me to decide whether I can or cannot win. It's for the public. And if they don't see me and they don't hear from me, I'm never going to win. And I found that quite challenging. The culture within the Lib Dems, if you can't win, it's not really worth it. We're just, doing our civil duty sort of thing. I found that attitude quite challenging. But I understand it. It's, and everybody goes through that process. So that was the first thing. So I stood as a local council candidate. And then I went to an event run by Lib Dem women. And we had our female MPs were sitting in Parliament, talking to us, saying we need more women to stand. We still don't have sufficient people standing. We have a lot of women who ask for the form, but then don't fill it out because they get nervous about it. And I have to admit, I took the form, and it took me about a year to actually fill it out because I just thought, why would I do this? There was that level of insecurity of why am I going to put myself out there? What do I have to say? And I was in a local party that already had a parliamentary candidate who is Irina von Visa, who ended up going to the European Parliament. And I had a very frank conversation with her, and she was like, you should run. I was like, you do realize if I go through this process? I'm going to be running against you. She said, yes, but it's a good experience. Go for it. You know, it's going to be good for the local party and it'll be fine. And I just thought, wow, I can't believe she's encouraging me to run against her. She was well established. Everybody know her, loved her, liked her. And I thought, I'm going to go against her. But she made it so easy. I got a lot of support also from the Lib Dem women group and so helping me through the process of finally filling out the application and getting the confidence to actually go through the testing thing that we have to do. So that went really well. And after that, I went through the whole hustings process, and I went through the all the things that you have to do. Obviously, I lost because Irina was already well established, liked, and she was a formidable person to go against. But it was a very positive experience, even though I lost, because I learned a lot. I made friends. People got to know me. Then obviously what then happened is that the European elections happen. Irina puts her name forward. She gets elected into the European Parliament, and Hammersmith is left without a PPC. In a general election, it's called. There is no time to go through the process again. And so I'm asked to step in because I had been, in essence, I'd come second in a contest of two. So it sort of just happened. But I think the moral of that story was that a lot of people said to me, oh, but you were so lucky, you were just in the right place at the right time. And I always find those comments quite funny because it takes a lot of work to get yourself in the right moment at the right time and then be ready when the opportunity appears. And then there's something that Oprah says. She says that success is where preparation meets opportunity. So when the opportunity presented itself, I was ready. I had done the work. I knew the constituency. I had made friends. I understood what the role was. I was well known and liked. And the fact that I lost and then I went on straight away to work on Irina's campaign for her next campaign. I took the loss well. I think was an important aspect of then when the opportunity came up, everybody went, actually, there's only one obvious choice. And so then I became the parliamentary candidate for Hammersmith.
So once you're in place as the PPC for Hammersmith, we have this general election called the end of 2019. What was your, and full disclosure, everyone watching, I ran Jessie's campaign. But aside from the brilliance of your campaign manager, what was your experience of that election campaign?
It was a very, very tricky campaign, I have to say. Well, can I tell a story of how you became my campaign manager?
Yeah, sure.
So after I can't remember, somehow I ended up going for a by-election in Fulham Broadway, because it was a by-election called, and I was there, and so everybody in the party said, oh, we want Jessie to run, so I did. And I produced my own leaflets. I was super proud of this leaflet. And then we get a volunteer, somebody I had never met before. Ryan comes and he looks and he's like, who did these? And I was like, why? They're like, they're not very good. I was like, oh, okay. Do you want to do them for me? And he goes, all right. And then that's how we became friends. I was like, okay, well, I'm not the best at designing leaflets. He's much better than me, so let him help me. And so then after, when the general election came up, and I was like, okay, I need some help. Everybody was running around helping target seat candidates. And if you know anything about the Lib Dems, if you are not target seat, you are low priority. Nobody really cares that much about you. So you have to put your team together and find people who are willing to help. And Ryan was really kind enough to be like, okay, I'll do your leaflets for you because you can't do them. So that was quite fun. And so, yeah, so that's what happened. But okay, the campaign was very tricky because I had just, with Ryan's help, we had just ran a very good campaign in Fulham Broadway, because I remember, even though there was very little chance of us winning, somebody asked me, I think it was Ruby Chow, who was an incredible source of help in that moment as well. She said, like, well, what is our goal? What are we going to try and do? I said, well, let's try and win. For me, it was a no-brainer. I realized that there was little chance of us actually winning because of how little work had been done in that place. But I thought it's a waste of time unless you give it your best chance, you put your best foot forward and try to win. And so we had run this campaign with the best intention. We had so much help from all over all over the city because there was really nothing else going on at the time.
Just be clear, this was a council by-election in Fulham Broadway.
A council by-election, and because there was nothing else going on in London at that particular moment, we had lots of help, and it was such an energetic, fun campaign. We didn't win; we came second, but we managed to beat the Tories, which I'm very, very pleased with. Not that did anything other than just make us feel good. But so we had that campaign. Then the general election comes in, and it's a very different thing because nobody wanted us to actually try and win. So you get attacked from people who think, oh, you're campaigning too hard, you're taking votes away from Remain. We already have a Remain candidate in Hammersmith. What are you doing? You shouldn't even be standing. And on the other hand, you had people saying, where is your campaign? Why aren't you doing anything? Jeremy Corbyn is going to win and you're just letting them, blah, 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 blah. So you were damned if you did, damned if you didn't. And it was really tough to find that balance, particularly as a candidate in a non-target seat. You're supposed to be going to other places. So I did my best to go and help in Kensington, Chelsea and Fulham, Westminster, and did my best to just put those resources. But that pressure was really, it was tough because you have pride in your own work and your name is on the ballot. People expect you the best, and not to do what I thought would be my best effort because you're not allowed to. It was challenging. It was a challenging thing because you're seeing your name on a ballot paper and that you could do you could do more, but your hands are tied in a lot of ways, and that's a hard thing to ask from candidates.
I think there's a lot to unpack there, in that there was, and obviously I was witnessing it from the front row seat as well. You had this issue in that you are not a target seat, therefore the party is putting pressure on you to go and campaign more in target seats, and you were neighbouring to some of the many that were put up in London. So which is, perfectly valid. We need to focus our resources where it matters. There's also this feeling that in Hammersmith constituency, you had, I think, about 400 members, which is more than many Lib Dem held seats had before 2015. And these are new members, they're very keen, very engaged, and they have joined us because they want to see us do something about the Labour Conservative duopoly. They want to see us do something. And they want to see something happen in their community. And then you have members of your local party who are saying, well, all I care about is Brexit, and your MP was a Labour MP, Andy Slaughter, who had been relatively good on Remain, but was still supporting Corbyn's Labour Party, which many people had very, very serious concerns over. So you are being pulled in 100 different directions, and I don't think many people understand that it's a huge thing to agree to be a candidate, to make that a big part of your life. It takes over your life in a big way for a long period of time, and I think the natural attitude in the party to not be supportive sometimes of these candidates when they're not one that's on a course to be winning that time is not very helpful. And then I sort of compare it to my own experience standing in 2017, which was similar in some ways, in that I was in a seat which was not a target. It was neighbouring Richmond Park, which was a target, was a held seat at the time. But we'd had a huge explosion in members. And I remember very distinctly, we had Lord Newby come and give a talk at the local party. And he was saying how, if we work really hard, we have a chance of coming second. and he was booed by all the new members. How dare he suggest we weren't going to win Putney? So that was kind of what we were trying to make sense of, was all these people who are really keen to wanting to do something, wanting to make a difference, and then telling them, actually, no, you can't do that, and you've got to go and help elsewhere, and nothing matters. But at the same time, you're trying to build something for the future. You can't just say, this place doesn't matter at all ever. And what we found in 2019 is that the party was, because of the defections or because of various things, was targeting lots of seats it had not done anything in before, because they were suddenly becoming viable, but we just completely neglected them for years in the past. So there's this really strange dynamic where you're trying to, you're being pulled in 100 directions, and there's not very much sympathy or understanding of the position a candidate gets in like that, and how much support that they need, even if they're not a candidate that right now is likely to win. They're still a person who has made a big commitment.
I think that the notion, for me, it was very strange to be in a situation, because in everything I've done in my life, I always want to do the absolutely best I can do, my best effort, just pull out all the stops. That's what I think. Even if I don't succeed, at least I know I've done that. But going into that general election was so weird, to be in a position where you couldn't do your best. Nobody wanted you to do your best. They wanted you to do just enough, but not your best, because your best might be too much. And I understand why that is. I understand why when you have the parliamentary first past the post system, you have to be strategic and put different areas. I get that. But when you're asking somebody to, put their name forward, where their name is now, public record, where people can contact you on Twitter, people can contact you online, and the general public don't necessarily understand these strategies. I remember getting letters of people saying, where is your campaign? You're not doing anything. And it's just like, it makes you feel like I'm a proud person. I like to do my best. And this person is complaining I'm not doing a very good job. And I know, because I can't. I'm not allowed to. And that is maybe that is just part of being a new candidate. Maybe that's, all of us go through that process, but it's challenging. And I think the party needs to understand that that is challenging for candidates, that it's a big thing to ask somebody who wants to do a good job to just be on the sidelines and be like, okay, I'll do just enough to look like I am actually doing something. That is challenging.
Another dimension to it, which I find a little troubling, is that the party has understandably got a lot of strength in areas that are very affluent and very middle class, and has naturally tended in those seats to choose candidates who are middle-aged, middle class, and kind of fit what people's image of an MP in those places would be. And those are our target candidates. And I was, asked in 2019 to what you should be spending your time helping Kensington or helping Chelsea and Fulham. And I have nothing against Sam Geema or Nicola Horlick. They're both fantastically capable people and such. But for me, it was, do I really want to spend my time focused on helping people who are, a former Goldman Sachs banker, an investment banker from the City of London, these people who I don't really feel a connection with, or do I want to give a bit more help to give a chance, or more of a chance for progression, for someone I could believe in, and someone I could say, this is the kind of person I want to see succeed in politics. And I think that's a real challenge to the party, in that we have made great strides on elements of diversity, particularly the parliamentary party is no longer 100% white. It's got a much better balance of male and female. But there is, because of where we do well and the demographics we do well with, the push towards candidates from a certain sort of social status in those key seats makes it a little awkward, I find.
Yeah, but one thing to keep in mind that is that the last general election was unusual in this, in the sense that we didn't go through the normal process for candidate selection in any seat, because it was so sort of, it was emergency procedure. So yeah, I mean, even my own selection, it wasn't, I had some legitimacy because I had gone through the process with Irina, but it is not an ideal selection. And the same happened with many other of our target seats, because we were out of time and we had to put candidates, and there was no time for training and making sure that they were road tested and coached in the way that that they needed to be. So of course we were bound to have some perceptions of unfairness in those situations. And it's always better that a democratic process is as open and as transparent as possible. And if you can't have that because you have to go through emergency procedures, that is going to be problematic.
I mean, I accept the urgency is always a factor in these things, trying to cope with different realities. But I think there's an issue in that if the message is that the focus has to be entirely on target seats, which some people do put across. I think actually that's changed a little in the party in recent years. It's got slightly more open than it was. There isn't quite, but there is still sort of a sense of if you're doing anything outside of target seats, you're doing something wrong, is a refrain you do hear a lot. And if those seats are principally, I mean, we live in sort of West and South West London. There are a lot of seats around here that are exceptionally middle class, and then the candidates in those seats are chosen from that particular group, partly because they're the people more like to be Lib Dem members, and there's a sort of lots of little steps that add up. I think that can be kind of alienating in some way for people who might otherwise want to be supportive of involving the party, that it becomes this sort of thing. And I contrast, and we'll come back to this later, but with the recent American election, where there's been a sort of allowed the state of Georgia, which was nowhere for the Democrats for many years, to start developing over the past 10 years. So, to start building, to start growing, with an entirely different kind of electorate than places the Democrats have done well elsewhere. And it's ultimately borne fruit. But there was that willingness for them to say, all the way back in 2010, you could start working on your plan to progress and build over these years. And even if it doesn't quite pay off straight away, that's okay, because in the long run it's worth it. And I think that trying to get that attitude right in the party is quite interesting, particularly if we don't just want to be a party that does well in certain kinds of places with certain kinds of candidates. So, looking ahead, what do you think the Lib Dems could be doing better? What do you think we should be doing more of, less of? How do you think the party should evolve from here? Particularly bearing in mind that we actually do have some time now. In theory, the next general election is not for 3.5 years. And if you look backwards in the last 3.5 years, we've had 2 general elections and a referendum. So thinking that, what we've got this time, what do you think the Lib Dems should be trying to do?
I think the party should allow people who want to run and who want to make a contribution do that and come in. And it takes a lot to become a candidate. It's a lot of commitment. You give a lot of your heart and soul, and you know that being a Lib Dem candidate, your chances of winning are very low. So to ask someone to go through that whole process and to do all that work, and then get to an election and say, well, actually, we don't want you to run a campaign in order to win, or try to run a winning campaign, that is a very hard thing to do, and it's demotivating. I think people do it once and then they will just be like, you know what, this is not for me. So of course, this is what happens in an election where you have first past the post system. That is, people will discover that on their own, but let them discover it on their own. Don't hamper their dreams before they have a chance to try, because you might be surprised. They might do things in ways that you never even dreamed, and that's the whole point of having new blood, fresh ideas. Let them be. But I think that we still have in our party that defeatist attitude of people who've lost too many times and think that we've never won, that means we're never going to win, and that is, we're never going to move forward unless we change that attitude.
I absolutely agree. I think, and neither of us are saying that there shouldn't be targeting, that people shouldn't be encouraged to help in target seats, and that non-target candidates shouldn't be asked, can they do something to support their local targets. But I think it's about giving everybody a route to move forwards, everywhere a route to progress, and that if you just turn around in elections and say, all right, now it's election now, and what you're doing doesn't matter, this is what matters. I think that is a bigger ask than we realise of people, of the candidates, and actually is very damaging to the relationships in your community. And I think something I was quite proud of with what we did in your campaign in Hammersmith was we went door to door with your members, asking them, firstly, are they willing to come out and campaign in the nearby target seats? And that did get people to go to those seats that would otherwise not have done so, like actually making that effort to reach out. And people saying, well, what are you doing, spending your time knocking on doors of members in Hammersmith, But actually that was actually helping the targets, probably more than just you and me going on knocking on some doors there. Then there was if they weren't willing to do that, which most were not, you have 400 members in Hammersmith. Realistically, you're not expecting more than 20, 30 of them to go and help somewhere else. Another 50 of them, we got to deliver in their own area, which they would not have done otherwise. These are not people we were making not do something useful in Kensington or Chelsea and Fulham. These were people who would otherwise have not have been engaged at all. And perhaps at a future time, them having started doing something, being motivated by the general election to start doing something, might lead them on to doing other things. And I think there are people we discovered in that campaign who are now playing a bigger role in your local party.
Yes. I mean, I have to say that the things that many people don't realize, that everything is done for volunteers. So none of the volunteers who are there in day out are a limited number of people. So there's always that concern that only a handful of people actually end up doing the majority of the work. And so it's completely understandable that people want to target, that they don't want to just willy-nilly spend the resources and the goodwill of people. So that is all very understandable. And so we just need to all of us need to change our attitude and think, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it because I want to do the best I possibly can, instead of trying to, second guess. Ultimately, it's up to the public, it's up to the British people, whether they like you or not, and whether you do as well as you can. But we shouldn't be doing that ourselves, I guess, is my main message.
So in this series, I've been asking everyone for one thought or idea they have about what's just happened in the US election. Because it's sort of strange to ignore it, but also we could easily go down a massive rabbit hole. So of what you've sort of seen, we're at the point now where we're recording this on the 14th of November. So Biden has won. Trump has not accepted that, but Biden has definitely clearly won at this point. So May, what's your one lesson that you've taken?
I think we should try to be good winners. I say we as if it had anything to do with me or something that happened in an American election. But I remember how it felt when Trump won, when Brexit happened, and having people being, haha, we won, all your ideas are rubbish, and you need to stop talking and not share your points of view. And my argument during that period was always, well, you know what, just because I've lost doesn't mean that I have no voice. And I think that this should be the same. We need to realize that actually, yes, Donald Trump lost, but actually he got more votes this time than he did last time. So there is clearly a lot of people who respond to his message, and we need to find a way of understanding what that message is. Try to heal divisions. Try to bring people together instead of just saying, "Haha, you've lost," because that is not going to create a good future going forward. And the beauty of democracy is you get to overthrow the government every so many years. And so just because he's won now doesn't mean that he can't lose, or sort of the left can't lose again. So we have to be gracious winners, if I'm allowed to say that, even though I'm not American. We have to be gracious, and we have to find ways of healing and ways of understanding that people have different views and that not everybody thinks like we do, and we have to find a middle ground, which is why, it's a good time to be a Lib Dem, because we're good at that.
I think that's a really good thought, actually. And yeah, it's like you can become very complacent, and I think actually that's a big part of the reason why Donald Trump has lost, and potentially a reason why the Conservatives in the UK are, again, I believe, struggling in future, in that they've doubled down so much in only doing things that appeal to their most extreme supporters. In the UK, we're looking at an absolute no-deal Brexit outcome. In America, Trump had no regard whatsoever for the people who didn't support him, and actually, eventually, he alienated some of his own supporters, or motivated people who were hadn't voted but the Democrats were able to turn out, and that's what brought him down. And I think that when you go about things, it's not so much about policy as about manner and way you behave. And I think showing that lack of respect for people who don't completely agree with you is a way to alienate yourself, your position, and eventually go on to lose afterwards and later.
But we need to get into the habit of attacking ideas and not attacking people. We seem to have forgotten that in the last 4 years. And I was recently reading a book by the biography of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and her talking about how important this concept of attacking ideas, not people, is in the US Supreme Court. And if they can manage that level of collegiality and this level of discourse where you can disagree with someone and still respect them when they are discussing some of the most divisive issues of generations, then I don't think it's too much to ask for our candidates, for people in general to observe this. And it's just, I think that we need to look at this moment of Donald Trump and this Twitter feed frenzy as a blip, not as the way that discourse should take place. We should be able to say, okay, I think what you're saying is complete rubbish, but I like you. You're a person. I'm going to respect you, but I don't respect your idea. That should be okay. We should be able to do that without disrespecting somebody as a person.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jessie, for agreeing to do this. Jessie, you're one of my best friends of the party.
Likewise.
This has been a real delight. So maybe we'll do this again at some future point if this series carries on. And I look forward to seeing you once we're allowed to see each other again.
Yes. I am still working because I'm a school teacher, so I'm still going out there working with my little mask on, and crazy times. But hey, we just gotta keep going.
Thank you for listening to Build Back Liberal. If you'd like to see more of these episodes, please subscribe or look at the other ones we've already recorded, including my most recent one with Lynn Featherstone. Take care and stay safe.